It was the kind of office building that felt permanently mid-construction, even though it had been open for years. All beige carpet and fluorescent lights, designed to feel neutral. I took a job there after deciding I needed something stable, a real career after drifting for a while. It wasn't glamorous, mostly just processing paperwork, but it was quiet and predictable. Then someone from my past showed up in the row right beside me. The chipped formica of my desk felt cool under my forearms. I was just finishing up the Peterson report, cross-referencing invoices. It was tedious, but it was safe. That's what I needed. Safe. Then Arlen was just there. Not walking up, not approaching, just there. He was leaning against the doorway to the break room, holding a mug. I hadn't heard him. It was the timing. I just thought, I really need to check the Peterson numbers one more time, and then he appeared, like he'd been waiting for the thought itself. I glanced at the clock. It was 2:17. He hadn't been in the break room a minute ago when I walked past with Bev. "Long day?" he asked, and I jumped, nearly knocking over my water glass. Just wrapping things up." I tried for casual. It felt brittle. He nodded, took a sip of his coffee. "Peterson's a mess, isn't he? Always is." How did he know I hadn't mentioned it to anyone? I'd barely started on it. "It's detailed," I said, hedging. He smiled, a small, tight thing. "Detailed is one word for it. I used to do a lot of invoice work back at, well, never mind." He trailed off. "He used to be a temp," I vaguely remembered, "before everything." It suddenly clicked. He was trying to be friendly, trying to make amends for, I don't know, whatever awkwardness there was at those parties years ago. He probably just overheard something, caught a snippet of conversation. A coincidence. A really weird coincidence, but still. People do that. He just wanted to be neighborly. He pushed off the doorframe. "Anyway, just thought I'd say hi." He paused, and that's when I noticed he was holding a file folder, pressed flat against his side. Just a manila folder, nothing special. But he kept his hand firmly on it, like he was guarding something. He was still there, leaning against the counter, sipping coffee. I hadn't even registered finishing my sentence about the quarterly reports. I just stopped. He hadn't said anything more, hadn't needed to. It was the way he was looking at me. Not at me exactly, more through me. "Long night?" he asked. Finally. It was Garrett. I hadn't really thought about Garrett since he'd become permanent staff. I'd assumed he'd gone back to school or something. "Just trying to get ahead," I said, forcing a smile. I started gathering my things. I needed air. I needed to not be in the break room with him. I usually walked past accounting on the way out, a slightly longer route, but it meant avoiding Bev and her endless cat stories. Tonight, I took the shortcut, down the main hall. Halfway there, I realized Garrett was walking behind me. Not close, maybe 15 feet, but definitely following. I sped up. He matched my pace. I rounded the corner by Ursa's office, the one with the frosted glass, hoping to throw him off. He was there, standing by the water cooler, looking at his phone, like he hadn't been walking right behind me at all. It was odd. Maybe he just happened to be going the same way. Maybe I was being paranoid. I remembered after the party how he'd always seemed to be around, not in a creepy way, just present, like a slightly blurry background character. I figured he was just eager to make a good impression, trying to network. Now that he was in, maybe he was just being friendly. But then he looked up. Our eyes met, and he smiled. A slow, deliberate smile. He didn't say anything. He just raised the manila folder, almost imperceptibly, and gave a tiny nod. I went straight to my car after that. I didn't even bother with the elevator. I took the stairs down from the 5th floor. Stupid, probably. But I just needed air. I needed to not be watched. I kept expecting to see him in the parking garage, leaning against a pillar or something, but it was empty. Just the usual fluorescent hum and the echo of my own footsteps. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that I was reading way too much into a guy being ambitious. Maybe he was just trying to network, show he was a team player. The folder thing was weird, I admitted, but it could have been project proposals, anything. I even started drafting an email in my head, a breezy, "Hey, good to meet you. Let's connect next week." Something to diffuse the awkwardness. Then I got to my apartment, and there was a package on my doorstep. It wasn't a normal delivery. No label, just plain brown paper taped shut. My name and address were handwritten, almost carefully. I didn't order anything. I brought it inside, set it on the kitchen table. It was surprisingly heavy. When I finally ripped the paper open, it wasn't a thing. It was a stack of prints, photographs, old ones from college, from parties, from before I even met Flora. Things I thought were long buried. And there on top a note, just one word typed. "Remember?" My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Don't bother calling the police. They won't believe you." I looked up, scanned the apartment. Everything seemed normal, but I knew with a certainty that settled like ice in my stomach that I wasn't alone anymore, and it wasn't about my job. It was about me. I went to Bev. She's in HR, a solid, practical person. I showed her the photos and the text. She took everything very calmly, which honestly made me feel worse, like I was overreacting. She said it was concerning, but advised me to document everything and to not engage. "We have security footage, of course," she said, tapping at her keyboard. "We can review it and see if we can identify anyone suspicious." Suspicious? Like I was the one being unreasonable. She pulled up footage from the lobby, the elevators, and the hallways. We fast-forwarded and rewound. There, Arlen. He was there several times, always just present, not doing anything, just entering or leaving around the same time as me. It wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. Bev said she'd speak to him, a casual conversation to gauge his reaction. I didn't like that idea. It felt weak. But she insisted it was the best first step. She kept using the word harassment, which didn't fit. This felt colder, more calculated. The next day, Bev told me Arlen had been cooperative. He'd claimed he was just getting settled and learning the building. He'd even offered to help me with a project, which Bev thought was a good sign of wanting to build rapport. I didn't tell her about the party, about how he'd been around then too. Always on the periphery. I hadn't really noticed it at the time, just a face in the crowd. Bev suggested I take 3 days of remote work, a cooling off period. I agreed. But when I got back to my apartment, something was different. Not anything I could put my finger on, just shifted. And I found a file on my computer, a text document, titled Notes. It was blank, completely unsettlingly blank. But it had been created today at 3:17 p.m., the same time I'd been on the call with Bev. It's been years. I still think about it. Not constantly, but it surfaces. Usually when I'm waiting. Airports, doctors' offices, anywhere with that particular quality of enforced stillness. It's not panic, not exactly. More like a tightening, a recalibration. After I went back to the office, things were quiet. Too quiet. Arlen avoided me, which was fine. Bev was overly solicitous, asking how the remote work had been. And if I was feeling safe, it felt performative, but I played along. I started locking my computer even when I stepped away for a minute. Just a habit. I changed all my passwords naturally, and I stopped using the company printer for anything personal. I convinced myself it was someone trying to rattle me. A disgruntled employee. Maybe someone with a grudge against the company. A weird, elaborate prank. It was a big place, lots of access. That's what I told myself anyway. It felt contained, like if I just tightened everything up and double-checked everything, it would go away. I started noticing things though, small shifts. My coffee cup moved a few inches on my desk. A file I'd closed would be open again. Nothing substantial. Annoying, more than frightening. I started documenting it, emailing myself timestamps and details. Proof, I guess. Then, last spring, I was at a conference in Boston, checking into the hotel. The desk clerk handed me my key. Tucked under it, almost casually, was a small folded piece of paper, just a single black and white photograph. It was from that party. The one Arlen was at. I hadn't thought about those photos in years. It was a rest area off the highway, the kind built for long hauls and quick breaks. Everything was polished metal and hard tile, designed to be cleaned endlessly. The smell of disinfectant was always thick in the air. I'd been driving for hours, just trying to cover distance after a few weeks spent crashing on a friend's couch. That stretch of road felt empty, even with the constant stream of 18-wheelers passing through, and I needed to stretch my legs before the final push home. Okay, so I got back in the car. Hands were still kind of shaky, honestly, just the way he was with those packets, like they were a miniature architectural project. I chalked it up to long-haul driving making people weird. You see things, you become things. I needed coffee badly, and to just move. I pulled out and glanced in the rearview mirror. He was still there, still at the condiment station, but now he was wiping down the entire machine. Every surface with individual wet wipes, like it was a surgical instrument. I thought maybe he's a cleaner, an off-duty one, just being thorough. It was a surprisingly clean rest area, actually. Usually they're grim. This one was almost aggressively spotless. I drove another 50 miles or so, and my phone buzzed. It was Price. Just a text. "Everything okay?" I hadn't told him where I was going exactly, just that I needed to get away for a bit. He knew things had been rough. I replied, "Yeah, fine, just a long drive." Almost instantly, another text from the same number. But it wasn't Price, it was a picture, one of those pictures from that summer, the one I'd only shown Price and Bia. God, my stomach dropped. Below it, a single line. "Enjoying the scenery?" I pulled over, heart hammering against my ribs. It had to be a mistake, a weird coincidence. Someone hacked his phone, but then another text, a different picture, another one I'd thought was private. And then, "He's watching you, you know?" I stared at the screen, frozen. Who was this? And how did they have those? It wasn't a hack, it felt targeted, like someone was deliberately messing with me. But Price would never, would he? He knew how much those photos meant to me, how vulnerable I'd been then. I pulled over, just had to. My hands were shaking so badly I almost drove into the median. B.A. It had to be B.A. She was the only other one who'd seen those pictures. Price was always careful, always calculating. B.A. was impulsive, vindictive when she was hurt. And we'd had a falling out, a stupid one, right before I left. It made sense, it had to. I called her, straight to voicemail. I left a message, rambling probably, accusing, demanding to know what she wanted. Then I turned the phone off. I couldn't stand the thought of another text. I tried to focus on the road, but every car felt like it was tracking me. I got off at the next exit, a tiny place called Havenwood, just a gas station and a diner. I figured I'd grab a coffee, try to calm down. The diner was empty except for the waitress, Selma, who barely glanced up when I walked in. I ordered black coffee and sat in a booth by the window, and then I saw him. Across the highway by the gas pumps. Silas. What was Silas doing here? He lived 3 states away. He worked at that weird antique shop. The one B dragged me to that one time. He was watching me, not obviously, just there, leaning against a pump, scrolling on his phone. My stomach dropped. Bia must have sent him. She always used people. I felt a surge of anger and a new kind of fear. This wasn't just about the pictures anymore. This was orchestrated. They were working together. It felt like a setup. I paid Selma, left a large tip, and practically ran back to the car. I changed my route. I took the back roads, figuring that would throw them off. Gravel roads, winding through farmland. I kept checking my rearview mirror, but nothing. Just fields and trees, but I knew they were still out there. The gravel was brutal. Every bump sent a jolt through the steering wheel, through me. I kept the speed up, trying to find a rhythm, but it was impossible. I was just watching for anything. A dust cloud, headlights, anything. I thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? Some guy I used to know is sending me creepy pictures and I think he's following me. They'd laugh. Or worse, they'd ask for details I didn't want to give. I was maybe 1 hour into those back roads when I saw the truck. Old Ford, faded red, parked halfway in a field. It was just sitting there. It wasn't moving, but it wasn't like a broken down on the side of the road parked vehicle. It was angled, like someone had driven it in there deliberately. And then I saw him. Silas. Standing next to the truck, arms crossed, just watching. He didn't wave, he didn't yell. He just stood there, a silhouette against the setting sun. It wasn't possible. What was he doing here? This wasn't a through route. He'd have to have been waiting. I floored it. I didn't even think. I just slammed the gas pedal and fishtailed around a corner, gravel spraying everywhere. I glanced back. He wasn't moving. He was still just standing there. Then I saw the other vehicle. A beat-up sedan pulled up behind Silas's truck, and a figure getting out. Gord. I'd almost forgotten about Gord. He and Silas, they were always together. This had to be some kind of prank. A really messed up, elaborate prank. They were trying to scare me. That had to be it. I kept driving, heart hammering. 1 mile down the road, I came to a small clearing, a dilapidated barn mostly collapsed, and in front of it, Silas's truck was blocking the road. Gord was leaning against it, smiling. Not a friendly smile. He was holding something. Something long and metallic glinting in the fading light. I just sat there, staring at Gord with that thing in his hand. It looked like a crowbar, maybe. Silas stayed in the truck watching. It wasn't a joke anymore, not even close. I tried to talk, to ask what they wanted, but it felt like my voice was stuck in my throat. Gord just kept smiling. He started walking toward the car, slow and deliberate. I called 911. I got through, thankfully. I explained I was being threatened and gave the location as best I could, said it was near Old Man Hemlock's farm, though I wasn't sure if that was right. The dispatcher sounded bored, like she gets calls like this all the time. She kept asking me to repeat the road name. It was gravel and unmarked. I didn't have a road name. They said they'd send someone, estimating 20 minutes. 20 minutes with that. I hung up and locked the doors. Gord was right beside the driver's side window now, tapping the crowbar against his palm. A rhythmic clink, clink, clink. He wasn't saying anything. The sheriff's deputy showed up after what felt like an hour. He was a young guy, barely looked old enough to shave. He talked to Gord and Silas for maybe 5 minutes. Then he talked to me. He asked what happened. I told him everything, about the pictures, about the way they'd been following me, about feeling like I was being watched for weeks. He didn't seem to believe the picture part. He said, "Boys will be boys, ma'am. Just a prank gone too far." He let them go with a warning. A warning. He said they were just raising a little hell. After they left, I looked up Silas. I did a real search, not just a quick Facebook check. I found a website. A research collective, apparently. They did behavioral studies, and Silas was listed as a lead researcher. He specialized in compliance and coercion. It said he had a background in psychology, but the way it was phrased, it wasn't about helping people, it was about understanding how people break. I thought maybe it was a misunderstanding, maybe they were just studying rural aggression or something. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But the crowbar, the way Gord hadn't said a word, it kept replaying in my head. It's funny. The things you forget, not the fear, not the weight of it, but the small stuff, like the smell of diesel. I hadn't noticed it at the time, not consciously, but now, whenever I fill up, there it is, that same acrid tang. It always makes me check the rear view. I moved. Obviously, I sold the car. Actually, I couldn't stand being in it. I ended up in a small town, further north. I thought being around people would help. It did, a little, but for a long time I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. Not in a dramatic way, just observed. A lingering glance, a car slowing down as I passed. I kept telling myself it was paranoia, that I was projecting. I started taking different routes home. I varied my schedule. It felt ridiculous, but it was better than that hollow feeling in my chest. I even invested in a dash cam, just to have something, to prove to myself I was being irrational. I assumed they'd given up, that Silas and Gord had moved on to someone else, another study. Maybe they were disappointed. Maybe I wasn't a compelling enough subject. I convinced myself it was about the experiment, about data, that somehow made it less personal. The worst part is, I still check the locks twice, every time. Even when I'm just running to the mailbox, it's automatic now, and I avoid eye contact with everyone. I tell myself it's just politeness, but it isn't, is it? It's a reflex. Just now, the dryer buzzed, a high-pitched whine. For a split second, it didn't sound like the dryer. It sounded like the engine of Gord's truck. I gripped the counter. Then, of course, it was the dryer, but it took a moment, a long moment, and I'm still listening. I still don't have a good explanation for any of it. Honestly, I've turned it over and over in my head for months, trying to find some logic, some reason why things unfolded the way they did, but there just isn't one. It started with a new place, a really good deal on a quiet street. Seemed too good to be true, maybe, and it was, though I didn't recognize how at the time, just a slow creep of unease. I should have listened to that feeling. The boxes were mostly gone, thankfully. Just a few remained in the spare bedroom, mostly books I hadn't decided where to put. It was good, really good. I'd been looking at that house for months, driving by, thinking about how quiet the street was, and the price. It was too good to be true, honestly, but everything had checked out. I'd even gotten a good vibe from the realtor, which rarely happens. I was unpacking the kitchen, putting away plates, when I saw him again. The neighbor. He was still out there with the gnomes. It was getting dark, closer to 9 now, and he was measuring. He had a little metal ruler, and he was measuring the distance between each gnome, not just placing them, measuring. I watched for a minute, trying to figure it out. Maybe he was planning a bigger garden, or some kind of symmetrical display. It was just odd. He'd stop, look up at my windows, then back at the gnomes, not staring, exactly, more like checking something. I remembered him from orientation, back in freshman year. Cal something. I'd sat near him in a couple of introductory classes, but we'd never actually talked. He was in the photography club, I think. A quiet kid, always had a camera. It was a strange coincidence running into him here. After all this time, I hadn't thought about him in years. I figured he recognized me. Maybe assumed I was the new owner. It explained the looking up. Just being polite. I went back to the plates, but I kept glancing out the window. He was still there, hunched over, ruler in hand, the gnomes glowing faintly in the dusk. He seemed intensely focused, like it was the most important thing in the world. I started taking the long way to work, just around the block. It added 5 minutes, but it kept the house out of sight, and his. I told myself it was about the traffic on Elm Street and the construction they'd been talking about. That's what I told Marcus, at least. He raised an eyebrow, said I was being ridiculous, but he's always been a bit dismissive about feelings. Then the bird feeder went missing. It wasn't stolen exactly, it was just gone. I'd filled it the night before and hung it from that branch over the roses. The next morning, the hook was empty, the chain swaying. I figured a raccoon, maybe. They'd gotten into the trash a couple of times, but it wasn't tossed in the yard and no seed was scattered around. It was just absent. And then I found the gnome. Not a gnome. The gnome, the one with the fishing rod. It was on my porch, right in front of the door. I hadn't bought any gnomes. I don't like gnomes. It was clean, no dirt, no leaves, like he'd carried it carefully and placed it there. I thought, okay, he's messing with me. Some weird, passive-aggressive apology for, I don't know, staring. Maybe he felt awkward after seeing me. Maybe he thought I'd think he was strange with all the gnomes, and this was his way of acknowledging it. It was a pathetic theory, I knew, but it felt safer than the alternative. I brought the gnome around back and put it in the shed. I didn't want Marcus to see it. He'd just laugh. But later, when I went to get the lawnmower, the shed door was slightly ajar. I'm sure I'd closed it. Absolutely sure. It's a heavy door, and it clicks. I distinctly remember the click. I checked all the windows, every single one. Then I went back to the shed, just to be absolutely certain. The door was definitely open, maybe 1 inch, but open. It wasn't the wind. There hadn't been a breeze all day. It was a stupid heavy door. I started to feel shaky, like I was coming down with something. Marcus was supposed to be home by 6. It was 5:30. I decided to get started on dinner. Something normal, something to make me feel better. I was peeling potatoes when I heard the back gate click. I froze. Probably just a neighbor walking their dog, but I peeked through the kitchen window and there was Cal just standing there looking at the garden, at the gnomes. He saw me looking. He didn't wave. He didn't even acknowledge me. He just stood there. Then he started walking towards the house. Slowly, not towards the gate, but along the side of the house, towards the kitchen window. My heart was hammering. I grabbed the phone, fumbling with it. I couldn't remember Marcus's number. Stupid. I knew it by heart. I scrolled through contacts, my hands slick with potato peelings. As Cal reached the window, he stopped. He was close enough that I could see the little lines around his eyes. He wasn't smiling. He was studying me. Then, he raised his hand. I thought he was going to knock, but he didn't. He just held it there, palm open, and in his hand was a photograph. A picture of me from college, one I'd completely forgotten about. He held it up, right against the glass, then slowly, deliberately tore it in half. I screamed, dropped the phone, just ran. Out the back door, across the lawn towards the neighbors. I didn't even think. I just ran. I pounded on Edna's door, gasping for air. She opened it, looking confused. "What is it, dear?" I tried to explain about Cal, the gnomes, the picture. She just patted my hand and said I was overwrought, that I needed to sit down. But I couldn't. I had to get back to the house. To make sure he wasn't, I don't even know what I thought he was going to do. When I got back, the torn photograph was lying on the kitchen table, and the back door was unlocked. The sunlight felt wrong. Too bright, too clinical, like it was exposing everything, and there was a lot I didn't want exposed. I went back inside, carefully checking the locks, even though I knew they hadn't been forced. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, except the photograph. Still on the kitchen table, the pieces spread out like a bad hand of cards. I called the sheriff's office. Deputy Hal came out, young guy, barely older than Marcus. He took pictures of the torn photo, dusted for fingerprints mostly around the back door. He kept asking if anything was missing. Jewelry, electronics. I kept saying no, just the photograph. He seemed disappointed, like I wasn't giving him a real crime to solve. He asked about Cal. I told him everything I remembered, which wasn't much. Just a face from college, a fleeting connection. Hal ran a check on him. It came back clean. No priors, registered to an address in 2 other counties. He said people do strange things, especially after a breakup. A breakup? That's what he thought this was. And honestly, for a minute, I almost believed him. Some misguided attempt to, I don't know, get my attention. It was pathetic, really? But the feeling in my gut, that cold dread, wouldn't go away. I asked Hal if he could check Cal's car, see if it had been near my property. He said they needed probable cause for that. He seemed eager to leave. As he was walking back to his car, he pointed to the garden. "Nice gnomes," he said. "You collect these?" I just nodded. He smiled, a little too long, and drove off. After he left, I walked around the garden counting them. All there, except the little one with the fishing rod, the one that had been slightly askew. It was gone, and I was suddenly, terribly sure this wasn't about a photograph or a misguided attempt to win me over. This was about control, about knowing where things were, taking things away. It's been years. I still check the locks, of course. Not obsessively, not like I used to, but every single night. And I don't leave things out. Not photographs, not anything personal. It's just habit now. A low thrum of anxiety that's always there, under everything else. I moved eventually. I couldn't stand being in that house, feeling like someone had mapped it out in their head, knew it better than I did. I told myself it was about reclaiming my space, starting over, but it was really about escaping the feeling of being watched. I tried to piece it together, I talked to people, tried to figure out what Cal wanted. He'd always been quiet. In college, he was just there, in the library, in the cafeteria. I never really knew him. I thought maybe he had a crush on me, some unrequited thing from way back then, that he was acting out, trying to get a rise out of me. It seemed almost pathetic enough to explain it. Petra said she'd seen him around town a few times after everything started, always just watching. Not obviously, but she noticed. She said he always seemed to be a little too close to where I was, and then she mentioned he'd asked her about my garden, about the gnomes. She thought it was odd. I haven't seen Cal since. I reported everything to the police again after Petra told me that. They did something. I don't know what. They never told me. I avoid garden centers now. I used to love browsing for little things to put outside. Now, just the smell of the potting soil, the bright colors of the flowers, it makes my chest tight. The other day, I was at the grocery store, and there it was. A small ceramic gnome, tucked amongst the seasonal decorations. It was holding a tiny fishing rod. It was askew on the shelf, just slightly.